20 years ago, the only people that knew the name Alex Pereira were the residents of Brazil's harsh, poor favelas. Fast forward to 2024, and every fight fan from around the world knows the stoic, downright terrifying face of Chama. Alex has achieved immeasurable success in kickboxing, has become a 2-divisional champion in UFC in just 8 fights, and is right now possibly the biggest name in the entire organization. But how did Alex Pereira turn from the worst hand that you could be dealt in life to one of the most legendary fighters MMA has ever seen? Well, this is the story of Alex Pereira. Back in 1987, Pereira was born into Sao Paulo's favelas. Born in this low-income and government-neglected town, it's safe to say that Pereira's early life goals were more focused on survival rather than money or achieving success. Alex's biggest aspirations as a child was to buy himself a motorcycle, or maybe if he was really lucky, a car. However, Pereira's family was struggling to put food on the table, so buying a luxury like a motorbike was out of the question for now. The Pereiras were so poor, in fact, that Alex had to drop out of middle school at around the age of 13 so he could work with his family to get some more income. He eventually found work at a tire shop, which didn't pay much at all, but it was still a step in the right direction. Or at least he thought. It turned out though that the people that Alex worked with at the tire shop weren't exactly the best people you want to be around as a kid, as they all had severe alcohol addictions that Alex wasn't aware of. Not knowing any better, they would offer Alex, who was just 13 years old at this point, some of their drinks. And it started Alex down a really bad path in life.
Foi que eu tava, já perdidão mesmo, eu bebia quase litro por dia.
One drink quickly turned into an uncontrollable addiction, which took hold of Pereira's life for the next 8 years. Everything he did was done in the pursuit of alcohol. It became an anesthetic to numb Alex's mind from the reality that he had no plan, no prospects, and no future in his life. Yet in 2009, at the peak of his addiction, Alex would stumble across something that would change his life, his kids' lives, and his legacy forever: a kickboxing gym. Seeing this gym lit a newfound spark deep inside of Alex, and he suddenly found the desire to get clean and turn his life around for the pursuit of kickboxing. Practicing a martial art just made sense to him. He wasn't good at soccer, which was of course Brazil's most popular sport, and growing up on the streets, he was no stranger to a fistfight every now and then. After all, you had to defend yourself if you wanted to survive in the favelas. So he finally managed to put down the bottle after 8 years, laced his shoes, and set foot inside of Sao Paulo's kickboxing gym. Without any other career prospects, Alex put everything that he had in him into training. And almost immediately, Pereira's first coach, Wilson Nunes, saw something special in Alex. He saw the fire that motivated him, the pain of the childhood in his eyes, and the want to better himself, to provide for him and his family. So Nunes called in the help of Belacqua Vera, one of the city's best kickboxing coaches at the time. Vera at first wasn't convinced that Pereira would be worth his time and attention, but when he put him in the ring with former Brazilian kickboxing champion Eduardo, his attitude suddenly changed. As Alex sparred the infinitely more experienced Eduardo, he tried to use his physicality and strength to overpower his opponent's technique. Naturally, he was completely outclassed and eventually quit. However, Vera saw the same passion and athleticism that Nunes had seen, and he agreed to take Alex under his wing to train him. And this moment was pivotal for Alex, the moment where Alex really thought maybe he had a shot in this world after all. Finally, after years of being an alcoholic, he had someone's respect. Someone believed that he could achieve something, and from that moment on, Alex made up his mind. He was going to become a professional kickboxer. Because he was making so little money at the tire shop, Vera had to negotiate a scholarship for Alex so he could pay for the monthly gym fee. Vera also had a fight with a number of the gym owners who didn't even want Pereira to train there because of his ethnic background. Nevertheless, Vera managed to get Alex into the gym and began to teach him the fundamentals of kickboxing to help him channel his strength and his resilience. In his early kickboxing days, Alex was still struggling with alcoholism to a fair degree, which severely weakened his ability to progress in the gym and realize his true potential. Seeing the demons he was fighting, Vera, who was a descendant of an indigenous family, decided to give Alex an ancient healing drink made from natural roots, honey, fruit, and lemon that would detox Pereira's body and bring him back to full strength. As he drank the concoction, Vera supposedly saw an indigenous spirit inside of Pereira, and from that moment on started to call him Poatan, a name of Tupi-Guarani descent that translates to hands hard as rocks. With his mind and body healed, Alex, or Poatan, was able to become a better athlete at alarmingly fast rates. Vera taught him the Brazilian Jaguar style of kickboxing, which focuses mainly on throwing strikes at more obscure angles while keeping both feet planted on the ground. This style complemented Pereira's natural power and athleticism perfectly, and after just 4 years of training, he had his first amateur bout, which he actually won. Pereira would go on to have 2 more amateur bouts, racking up a record of 2 wins and 1 loss before turning professional. In his first pro bout, Pereira won the national 187-pound championship and proceeded to win a few more national titles before eventually entering Glory, one of the biggest kickboxing organizations in the world in 2012. This was massive. Alex made a name for himself in a way that nobody could have expected, and the fans simply loved Alex's fighting style, along with his extremely stoic personality outside the ring. His strikes had a certain flair that the organization hadn't seen before, and his ability to stand directly in front of his opponents and knock them out with one punch was insane to watch. In 2015, Alex would make the bold transition to mixed martial arts for the first time, taking up both wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes to prepare himself should a fight go to the ground. He made his first MMA debut in 2015 under the Jungle Fight organization. However, the fight went far from how Alex would have liked it to go. Coming off of this loss was tough, but he did bounce back after a win over Marcelo Cruz a few months later, knocking him out in a single round. Surprisingly, after this win, Pereira turned his attention back to the kickboxing ring to take on an American rival and hot prospect, Israel Adesanya, in 2016. At the time, Adesanya was on a monstrous 11-fight win streak in kickboxing and seemingly had all the tools to beat the Brazilian. The fight proved to be extremely technical, and Izzy really pushed Alex to his limits throughout the fight. However, in the end, Pereira won the fight by unanimous decision, which Izzy did not agree with in the slightest. As a result, the two actually went to a rematch in 2017, but this time, Poatan was able to make the most of his power, knocking out Izzy in the 3rd round and putting a conclusive end to their rivalry. Or so they thought. But we'll get back to that in a minute. Alex Pereira went on to dominate the kickboxing world until 2021, racking up an impressive record of 33 wins and 7 losses, with 21 of his wins coming by the way of knockout. He defended his belt for a total of 5 times and cemented himself as one of the greatest kickboxers of all time. However, dominating only one combat sport just wasn't enough for Poatan. He still wanted to take over the world of MMA despite his fairly lackluster debut. And to dominate in the octagon, Pereira needed to do one thing. He needed to sign with the UFC.
Now it's official. UFC, thank you. I'm so happy to be part of the family.
His desire to enter the UFC was likely multifaceted. He probably wanted to earn more money, and he surely wanted to test his fighting ability to a never-seen-before level. But his by far biggest motivator was to face his former rival, Israel Adesanya.
He watches all my fights, and every time I fight, he'll try and put something out like, I beat this guy. No one knows who the f he is. And he's gonna be that guy when I'm world champion, when I'm a legend. He's gonna be at some pub talking some shit about I beat that guy one time.
Safe to say, Pereira did not appreciate the slander on his name and was not gonna let it slide. He had to assert himself as the better fighter, and a new sport in the UFC was the perfect opportunity. So how did Alex Pereira get the attention of Dana White? Well, in between his kickboxing fights, Alex would have a total of 2 more MMA bouts, knocking both of his opponents out with punches, and these absolutely brutal fights were enough to get Pereira a contract with the UFC. From here, all he had to do was climb the rankings and earn himself a title shot. Pereira had his first fight in the UFC in November 2021 against middleweight contender Andreas Michelides. He ended that fight pretty quickly, knocking Andreas out in the 2nd round with an absolutely legendary flying knee. He then beat Bruno Silva by unanimous decision before taking on Sean Strickland in 2022, who at the time was a serious contender for the middleweight fight. Strickland is also a great boxer, so many thought that he'd be able to stand with Alex and grind his way out to a decision victory. However, when these two stepped in the octagon, Pereira made it very clear that he was on a whole different level. He stood directly in front of Sean, walking him down and finding a new home for the vicious left hook in the 1st round that knocked him down. A few follow-up punches finished the job in just under 3 minutes. With a win over Strickland, Pereira was now in line for a title shot, and on the 12th of November 2022, Izzy and Poatan stepped in the octagon to meet each other for yet a 3rd time. The fight started as most expected. It was pretty cagey for the opening minutes, but one thing that became apparent very quickly, Izzy was winning the fight. And this became the story for the next 4 rounds. Izzy would outpoint Poatan, stay out of range, and get 5 minutes closer to the end of the fight. However, when you have power like Alex Pereira, it only takes one punch to change the course of the fight. And during the 5th round, Pereira landed his signature left hook to the temple of Adesanya, which sent him flying to the cage. From here, it was an easy finish for Pereira, and he got the TKO victory in the final round after being down extremely far on the scorecards. And after this fight, a star was born. Suddenly, Alex Pereira, after just a few fights in the UFC, had taken out one of the most dominant champions the organization had ever seen. And to fans' liking, he didn't make a big deal out of his win. He remained respectful, humble in victory, yet he held a look that could kill. He was the embodiment of a true martial artist. The two later would rematch in the cage in 2023, and this time, Izzy was not going to let the same thing happen, and used Pereira's aggression against him to land two vicious overhand counters from the cage that knocked Pereira out cold. For Izzy, this was redemption, and he finally beat the man that was always better than him. But in reality, the score is still 3-1 in Pereira's favor even after the loss. And after losing the belt, Pereira felt it was time to move up to light heavyweight, which was a much more natural weight class for him and meant that he didn't have to cut quite so much weight before every fight. Plus, if he could do what Izzy failed to do and capture the light heavyweight belt, he would have yet another psychological one-up on Adesanya's career, which is what it's always been about since their first fight. Pereira took on Jan Blachowicz, beating him by split decision over 3 rounds. After this, he was handed a title shot in 2023 over champion Jiri Prochazka. The build-up to this fight was legendary and essentially a match between a Brazilian warrior and the equivalent of a modern samurai. However, once again, Pereira proved that he was on another level and took out Jiri in just under 2 rounds. Pereira then headlined UFC 300, the biggest UFC card for over half a decade. He took on former champ Jamal Hill, and once again in this pre-fight build-up, the fight was seen as a 50-50, with Hill theoretically holding preference over the Brazilian, but I think you know how this one turned out. Seconds after dismissing the ref, who tried to stop the fight because Hill kicked Alex in the crotch. And recently, in June of 2024, he rematched Jiri, knocking him out even more convincingly, cementing himself as the best light heavyweight in the world. And since the Jiri rematch, it's not an overestimation to say that the combat sports world is quite literally in the hands of Alex Pereira. He's beaten every top light heavyweight with ease, becoming the 9th UFC fighter to win a title in 2 divisions in just 7 UFC fights, and has only lost once in the last 3 years. There has even been rumors that Pereira is looking to move up to the heavyweight division and challenge either Jones or Aspinall after they eventually unify the division. And if he does this, he'll make history, becoming the first ever 3-weight champion in the UFC. Pereira, along with these wins, has also gained a cult-like following due to his nonchalance on the mic and insanely stoic demeanor. Thousands of people go to every UFC post just to comment Shama, while some people are even convinced that he would beat a prime John Jones and DC without breaking a sweat. Ultimately, the rise of Alex Pereira was nothing short of legendary. His life started in some of the worst possible circumstances, and for 21 years, he had no ambition, desire, or purpose. He was simply living from a bottle. Yet, by devoting himself to one random kickboxing gym, he has taken over 2 of the hardest sports in the world, made millions of dollars in the process, and cemented himself as one of the greatest fighters of all time. If you did make it here, make sure to drop a sub and let me know what other videos you want to see on this channel. I'll see you all next time.